White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said she spoke with him about it this morning, a phone call between the president and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. According to CNN sources, the president was not happy earlier today after seeing a report about the online retail giant. After getting off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement, one takeaway became clear. This is being viewed as a hostile and political move by Amazon. Why did Amazon do this? Especially when the Biden administration has pushed inflation to its highest level in 40 years. Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda group and is pulling away from America's supply chain, not because of market forces or regulations, but due to President Trump's harsh tariffs. These steep import taxes have driven up costs, forcing Amazon, which controls roughly 40% of U.S. e-commerce, to shift its operations to lower-cost nations. This shift exposes a major weakness in Trump's plan to boost American industry, as jobs and investment now flow overseas instead. Multiple reports, including one by Bloomberg, reveal that major firms will cut U.S. imports by roughly 20% in 2025 due to these policies. By mid-2026, experts predict e-commerce giants like eBay and Alibaba will reduce their U.S. supply chains by 30%, further weakening America's role in global trade. In April 2025, President Donald Trump announced a bold new trade policy that shook global commerce. He implemented a 10% tariff on all imports entering the United States and an eye-popping 145% tax targeting goods from China, the world's biggest manufacturing hub. This move, called economic warfare by many analysts, disrupted global supply chains almost immediately. The tariffs created an urgent crisis for Amazon, a company that controls roughly 40% of U.S. e-commerce. Within 2 months, Amazon launched a massive $13 billion overhaul of its supply chain agreements to protect itself from rising costs. The tariffs sharply increased the prices of everyday goods Americans depend on: smartphones, laptops, clothing, and household appliances. According to a Reuters estimate, the cost of importing electronics surged by 25% due to the 145% tariff on Chinese goods. Amazon, known for low prices and lightning-fast delivery, had a stark choice: absorb the losses or pass them on to customers. Neither option was viable. The company acted quickly, slashing contracts with suppliers reliant on high-cost imports and rethinking its global logistics approach. This wasn't a minor adjustment. It was a massive shift in Amazon's entire operation. The company, long celebrated for its efficiency, could no longer rely on its existing network of suppliers and shipping routes. Instead, Amazon began redirecting resources to bypass the crushing tariffs. Contracts worth billions were renegotiated or canceled, and new partnerships were forged in regions less impacted by U.S. trade policies. As Bloomberg reports, this shift reflects a much broader trend, as multinational firms rush to adapt to America's unpredictable trade climate. Trump's tariffs dwarf earlier trade measures. In 2018, his administration imposed a 25% tariff on Chinese goods, a move that strained supply chains but still allowed firms like Amazon to adapt by making pricing adjustments or renegotiating supplier deals. The new 145% tariff, however, is a real game changer. It's more than just a tax. It's a barrier that makes importing from China nearly impossible for many businesses. Smaller firms unable to absorb the added costs now risk bankruptcy, while giants like Amazon have no choice but to completely overhaul their operations. The $13 billion Amazon reorganization, done in just 2 months, shows how disruptive this new tariff truly is. Trump intended these measures to revive American manufacturing by making foreign goods less competitive. Yet the immediate results suggest otherwise. Instead of boosting U.S. production, these tariffs have pushed firms to find workarounds and alternatives beyond the American market. According to a Wall Street Journal analysis, U.S. import volumes dropped by 15% in the first half of 2025 as Amazon and other firms rerouted their supply lines to mitigate the financial impact. This shift doesn't just affect Amazon. It signals a much broader retreat by global businesses from the U.S.-centric trade model. The ripple effects are already reshaping commerce. Supply chains that once flowed through American ports now favor other global hubs, especially along Asia-North America trade corridors. Amazon's $13 billion overhaul required canceling dozens of supplier agreements and redirecting billions in investments to more favorable sourcing regions. Meanwhile, the long-term health of U.S. trade infrastructure is in doubt, as ports, trucking firms, and warehouses reliant on Amazon's import traffic are already seeing reduced activity. The Trump administration defends its tariff policies as tools to strengthen the U.S. economy. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently stated that these taxes pressure foreign competitors and give the U.S. more leverage in negotiations. Yet, many economists disagree. A study by the Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that these tariffs will cost American businesses roughly $50 billion each year, with little evidence of new manufacturing jobs created. Amazon's sweeping changes, far from bringing production to U.S. soil, show how companies are finding ways to sidestep the American market altogether, reshaping global commerce in the process. Consumers are also starting to feel the pinch. While Amazon has so far shielded shoppers from immediate price hikes, the rising import costs aren't sustainable. Retail analysts warn that goods like electronics and clothing could rise by 10 to 20% by early 2026 if the tariffs remain in place. For a company like Amazon, which serves millions of customers every day, these higher costs could chip away at its competitive edge. The decision to restructure $13 billion in contracts buys some time, but it's only a temporary fix for a deeper problem rooted in trade policy. The geopolitical stakes are equally high. The tariffs were meant to weaken China's economic dominance, but they risk alienating a key trading partner. China, which supplies roughly 30% of U.S. imports, is not standing still. Beijing has already strengthened trade ties with other regions, reducing its reliance on the American market. A Financial Times report shows that Chinese exporters are signing new agreements with Asian and European partners to make up for losses caused by U.S. tariffs. Amazon's shift away from Chinese suppliers reflects this trend, isolating the U.S. further from global trade networks. Looking ahead, Amazon's recent move is just the starting point. Experts predict the company will reroute another $10 billion in supply chain contracts by the third quarter of 2025 as it adapts to the tariff landscape. This shift could reshape trade patterns across the Pacific, making Asia-North America routes far less reliant on U.S. ports. Other retail giants like Walmart and Target are expected to follow suit, intensifying the impact of the tariffs. The result may be a long-term shift in global commerce, with the U.S. losing its grip over critical supply chains. The paradox of Trump's trade strategy is hard to miss. Created to protect American workers, it now pushes businesses to invest elsewhere. The lack of new factories or jobs in the U.S. suggests protectionism may be backfiring. Instead of making the American economy stronger, the policy forces giants like Amazon to focus more on survival than loyalty to the U.S. market. If this trend continues, the U.S. may find itself with a diminished role in global trade as businesses seek stability in less restricted environments. Amazon's $13 billion overhaul is a wake-up call. It shows how quickly global firms can adjust to policy changes, and how easily those adjustments can bypass the U.S. economy. The very tariffs meant to assert American strength are reshaping trade in ways that could weaken it, according to trade experts. By mid-2026, if the policy persists, the U.S. could lose roughly 20% of its share of global import traffic. Amazon's bold shift may keep the company competitive, but the long-term fallout for the American economic landscape is still highly uncertain. A quiet but profound shift is reshaping global commerce, as Amazon redirects its supply chain from American ports to new hubs in Mexico, India, and Vietnam. In these countries, factories and distribution centers are booming, while the once bustling ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach now face a sharp slowdown, with workers bearing the brunt of the change. This shift, triggered by President Trump's tariffs, is more than a corporate adjustment. It signals a deeper erosion of America's role as a global trade powerhouse. Through investments abroad, Amazon is boosting economies in developing nations, but at a cost. U.S. port cities and their workers are being left behind. For decades, Los Angeles and Long Beach were the backbone of American trade, processing millions of containers from Asia every year. These ports were vital for Amazon's ability to deliver goods quickly and cheaply across the U.S. Yet in 2025, activity has plummeted. According to Reuters, data from this year shows a 22% drop in container traffic through Los Angeles, a direct result of Amazon rerouting shipments to sidestep U.S. tariffs. Fewer ships mean fewer jobs, putting the livelihoods of dockers, truck drivers, and warehouse staff across California's port communities in serious doubt. Meanwhile, across the border, Mexico has emerged as a vital link in Amazon's North American supply chain. The company has ramped up its presence in northern states like Tijuana and Monterrey, where new distribution centers are rising quickly. A Bloomberg report estimates a 35% jump in logistics facilities across Mexico in 2025, fueled by Amazon's search for cost-effective ways to move goods into the U.S. These hubs enable goods to cross by land, bypassing costly tariffs on shipments arriving by sea. Mexico's proximity, lower labor costs, and favorable trade agreements have made it an ideal partner for Amazon's new supply chain strategy. India and Vietnam are also gaining ground as critical pieces of Amazon's global network. Both nations offer low-cost manufacturing and attractive incentives, drawing billions in corporate investment. According to a World Bank analysis, Vietnam's export sector surged by 18% in 2024, thanks in part to multinational firms like Amazon shifting production out of China. With its huge workforce and strengthening infrastructure, India is emerging as a vital source of electronics and apparel. These nations aren't just temporary alternatives anymore. They're becoming permanent anchors in Amazon's supply chain, reshaping global trade patterns. This shift delivers major economic benefits to Mexico, India, and Vietnam. New factories and warehouses create jobs, boost local economies, and position these countries as pivotal links in global commerce. For example, the wave of Amazon facilities has sparked growth in Mexico's construction, transportation, and retail industries. Vietnam's manufacturing boom attracts skilled workers to its cities, while India's rising tech hubs win more and more high-value manufacturing contracts. These changes solidify the economic positions of these nations, allowing them to compete for global influence once dominated by the U.S. and China. Meanwhile, the slowdown at U.S. ports is causing a ripple effect of economic pain in places like Los Angeles and Long Beach, where port jobs support tens of thousands of families. Uncertainty is, well, definitely growing. Declining container traffic has slashed work hours for dock workers and drivers, and small businesses like trucking firms and diners are really feeling the strain. According to a Port of Los Angeles study, every 10% drop in container volume eliminates roughly 5,000 jobs in the area. In 2025, a 22% reduction in activity has already taken its toll, leaving many workers grappling with layoffs or reduced pay. The bigger picture is equally troubling. The U.S. has long relied on its ports as gateways to global commerce, granting it significant leverage over supply chains. But as Amazon and other firms shift their operations overseas, that leverage is weakening. A Financial Times report warns that the U.S. could lose 10% of its global trade influence by 2027 if this trend doesn't change. Meanwhile, Mexico, India, and Vietnam are stepping in as manufacturing and logistics hubs, reshaping the world's economic order and challenging America's ability to set the rules of global trade, a role it's held for decades. Amazon's investments abroad also highlight the limits of Trump's protectionist agenda. The tariffs were intended to bring manufacturing back to U.S. soil, but they've pushed businesses to seek alternatives beyond its borders. Unlike China, which faces hefty tariffs, Mexico and Vietnam benefit from agreements like the USMCA or ASEAN trade partnerships, making them attractive destinations for firms looking to bypass U.S. taxes. Amazon's new facilities in these regions aren't temporary measures. They're long-term commitments, suggesting that these tariffs are reshaping global trade in ways that may long outlast Trump's presidency. The economic contrast between the U.S. and its rising competitors is, honestly, pretty stark. Mexico's border cities hum with construction and new jobs, while California's port areas struggle with declining tax revenues and rising business closures. In Long Beach, for example, officials now estimate a 15% drop in port-related economic activity, threatening funding for schools and public services. Meanwhile, Vietnam's export hubs are breaking records, with Amazon's factories expected to boost the nation's GDP by roughly 2% in 2025. At the same time, India's logistics sector is projected to expand by 12% each year, fueled by e-commerce giants like Amazon. Looking ahead, the shift will only pick up speed. By mid-2026, trade experts forecast that Mexico will overtake several U.S. ports as Amazon's primary North American logistics hub. This shift could lead to another 15% drop in U.S. port jobs, as even fewer goods move through Los Angeles and Long Beach. The docks that once powered America's consumer economy may soon stand as relics of a bygone era, while new trade routes through Guadalajara and Hanoi claim the spotlight. This is more than just a logistical shift. It's a geopolitical turning point that could redefine global economic power. Amazon's pivot also raises serious questions about the future of American workers. As jobs move to lower-wage nations, U.S. dock workers and truck drivers face an uncertain future. Retraining programs or new industries could help, but those solutions take time and investment that are currently in short supply. The tariffs meant to protect American jobs have instead pushed opportunities offshore, leaving many port city workers to navigate a shrinking job market. This gap between policy intentions and outcomes highlights the harsh reality of protectionism in a globalized world. The stakes extend far beyond the economic sphere and deep into global politics. As Mexico, India, and Vietnam gain prominence, they're strengthening ties with major international players, including the EU and ASEAN nations. This could dilute American influence in trade negotiations and weaken its ability to shape global supply chains. A Brookings Institution report suggests that nations hosting Amazon's new hubs will naturally align more closely with international trade blocs, potentially sidelining the U.S. in future agreements. The very tariffs meant to assert American dominance may instead hasten a shift in global economic power. By mid-2026, this transformation will likely be irreversible. Mexico's role as Amazon's North American hub will solidify, with new facilities handling roughly 30% of the company's regional shipments. Vietnam and India will claim an increasing share of Amazon's global production, further reducing activity at U.S. ports. Meanwhile, the decline in jobs across Los Angeles and Long Beach will test the resilience of America's trade infrastructure. Amazon's strategic shift may be a win for its bottom line, but it leaves the U.S. grappling with the unintended fallout of its policies. All across the United States, major retailers like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, and Mattel are sounding the alarm. They warn that prices for everyday goods are rising and that some products may disappear from store shelves altogether. A clear sign that the balance of global commerce is shifting in ways America can no longer control. This shift isn't caused by market trends or seasonal changes, but by the steep tariffs introduced by President Trump's administration in 2025, which have pushed up the cost of imported goods. These policies, designed to protect American industries, are putting a squeeze on families and threatening economic stability. As retailers try to adapt, the fallout reshapes consumer habits and raises serious concerns about the future of the U.S. economy. The tariffs, especially the 145% tax on Chinese imports, have disrupted the supply chains that retailers rely on for affordable goods. Walmart, long known for its low prices, is now grappling with a 12% rise in the cost of consumer goods, according to Bloomberg. This affects everything from clothing to kitchen appliances, forcing the retail giant to rethink its pricing strategies. Target, another cornerstone of American retail, is dealing with similar supply chain bottlenecks, driving up the cost of electronics and household essentials. Home Depot is sounding the alarm that whole product lines, such as tools and building materials, could disappear due to sourcing constraints. Meanwhile, Mattel, the manufacturer of Barbie dolls, is grappling with delays and rising costs that could make its iconic toys more expensive and harder to find. These changes hit everyday Americans directly, especially lower-income families who depend on retailers like Walmart and Target for essentials. A single mother buying school supplies or a family shopping for winter coats now faces sharply higher price tags. Walmart's estimated 12% price hike adds hundreds of dollars to annual household budgets, putting even more strain on those already living paycheck to paycheck. Many are being forced to make tough decisions, skipping certain purchases, choosing lower quality alternatives, or going without altogether. According to a Consumer Reports survey, 30% of low-income households have already cut back on grocery spending in 2025 due to rising prices. This shift signals widespread financial strain and a growing sense of economic insecurity across the nation. The struggles of the retail sector have serious implications for the broader U.S. economy. Retail provides jobs for millions, from cashiers to warehouse staff, and consumer spending drives roughly 70% of the nation's GDP. As prices climb, demand shrinks, putting jobs and wages in the line of fire. A recent National Retail Federation report projects that a 10% drop in consumer spending could wipe out 500,000 retail jobs by mid-2026. This creates a vicious cycle where rising prices lead to reduced purchases, slowed sales, and ultimately fewer hours or layoffs for workers. Small businesses like local shops relying on affordable wholesale goods are especially vulnerable, lacking the resources to absorb rising costs. Looking ahead, the outlook is grim. Analysts warn that if the tariffs remain in place, retail prices could rise another 15 to 20% by late 2025, further straining household budgets. According to the Economic Policy Institute, this would add roughly $1,000 a year in expenses for the average family. Discretionary spending on non-essentials, like dining out or entertainment, could drop by 8%, hitting industries far beyond retail. The slowdown threatens to drag down overall economic growth, with the Peterson Institute for International Economics forecasting a potential 1% drop in GDP by 2026. The political consequences could be just as significant. Rising prices hit the most vulnerable communities hardest, deepening inequality and fueling frustration with government policies. Trump's tariffs, framed as a way to protect American jobs, have instead driven up living costs, contradicting promises to rein in inflation. This discrepancy threatens to erode public trust, especially among working-class voters feeling the pain most sharply. Political analysts warn that this growing economic dissatisfaction may shape voter behavior in the 2026 midterm elections as families grapple with tighter household budgets. The warning signs from the retail sector aren't just about rising prices. They reflect a deeper struggle over economic stability and the effectiveness of America's trade policies. Amazon may not have relocated its headquarters, but it is increasingly focusing its core operations beyond U.S. borders, pouring investment into lower-cost regions like Mexico and Vietnam. This shift is more than a corporate strategy. It marks a quiet yet pivotal retreat from the Made for America model that once shaped national economic policy. As global supply chains evolve, America's economic influence continues to wane, with repercussions felt not only in trade statistics, but across jobs, policy debates, and everyday life.